afternoon. Good afternoon. Thank you so very much. Good evening, rather,
Yes, good
listeners.
evening, good evening.
Yes, good evening. Thank you so very much for staying with us. We're still live inside Nationwide at 5. I'm Tyrone Reed.
And I'm Cliff Hughes.
Well, we want to turn our attention in the nation's business, listeners, to developing issue. Yes, it's being described as a public health emergency. A number of senior prosecutors are describing the volume of sexual offense cases involving young girls as victims presenting before the island's courts, particularly as it relates to the rural circuits. They are describing the chilling influx of these cases in the courts as a pandemic.
Well, in today's Observer newspaper, one prosecutor is quoted as saying, quote, "We have been seeing a lot of sex cases. Prosecutors are tired of it. It is terrible. It is a public health emergency. It is ridiculous." End of quote. Another prosecutor is quoted as saying, "A lot of our girls are being objectified. What we're seeing is that a number of mothers are pimping out their daughters for economic gain. Girls are being sexualized."
The perpetrators range from fathers, boyfriends, family friends, and relatives to community residents, including taxi and bus drivers. St. Thomas, St. Mary, St. Catherine, and Westmoreland are the parishes with the most red flags, according to the data. The Director of Public Prosecutions, DPP Queen's Counsel Paula Llewelyn, says some of the cases she's seen are very, very disturbing. She joins us now.
Good evening, DPP.
Good evening, Madam
Good
DPP.
evening, gentlemen. Good evening to your listeners.
Let me begin by asking you to paint a portrait for us, a picture of what you and your prosecutors are seeing across Jamaica where these cases are concerned.
Well, as we have described it, it's a public health emergency. I was just talking to one of my senior deputies, and I'm going to call his name Mr. Taylor, Queen's Counsel, who loves to collect statistics. And up to 2018, he has been collecting reports that we generate every year from different parishes. And that is why he's able to say, well, he told me, St. Thomas, St. Mary, which we all know, Portland, St. Catherine, 60%, sometimes to 80% of the list can be in respect of sexual offenses. So, for example, in St. Mary, this year, the Chief Justice was there, and out of 59 circuit cases over the 4 weeks, 36 were sex cases. So we have been finding, and looking at it over the last 10 years, it's quite clear to us that persons are so, the policymakers are so focused on murder and even human trafficking. But this area is not getting sufficient attention. Now listen, gentlemen, you have a situation where you have the main agencies, Children's Advocate, that's an executive agency. The Child Protection Family Service Agency, I think that is under Ministry of Education. You have several departments of the Gender Affairs, Sports, Culture, Gender Affairs, that is one other ministry. You have the Victim Support Unit and the Child Diversion, that is Ministry of Justice. We believe the time has come that in the same way you have a focus on murder and a focus on human trafficking, where you have a national task force which embraces elements of all the stakeholders. We need to have targeted intervention and one central task force that is going to monitor the empirical data as it relates to the different parishes. They are going to look at the socio-economic realities, why it is that, for example, in these 4 parishes, and perhaps Westmoreland as well, you have many more sexual offense cases, and the type of cases. I was talking to Mr. Taylor, who has been prosecuting for over 20 years, and we are the 2 most senior people at the office. And we were remarking, compared to the time when we started to prosecute these cases, you always had carnal abuse. sometimes you would have unfortunate situations. You have cultural issues about having sex with a child to assist with a sexual disease. But the level of depravity that we are seeing, and it is obviously being driven, even sometimes, if it's child and the child, you can see that the sort of positioning of the children outlined in the statement is because of the access to pornography and social media by the child, and the sort of, hold down takeaway of child by child. It is really concerning. Gentlemen, I have not been as DPP on circuit. That was in my early days. And I decided to go to Westmoreland for 3 weeks. And I didn't know I would see a time when I would take refuge in prosecuting a murder case.
Wow.
Given the type of matters, and sometimes we have to
Hold on. You're a prosecutor of more than 30 years.
Yes.
You have been in the trenches. You're a veteran. And
Yes.
you had to take refuge in a
in
murder
prosecuting
case?
a murder case.
Why?
I was believed.
Why?
Because of the nature. I mean, granted, 90% of the attorneys or the accused in the sexual offense cases, they did not want to do judge alone. And we were not doing jury matters. I think one jury matter was done at the beginning of the circuit before I got there, and we got a conviction. But most of the attorneys in all the parishes prefer to do sexual offense cases before the jury because they know that there's a cultural underbelly that says it's just a little sex. It's just a little sex. They are not looking at the...
So their chances of getting an acquittal are better.
Much higher. Much higher when it comes to sexual offenses. And sometimes when you have literally evidence where you can see, say somebody can say that they saw the man's penis going into the child's vagina. And the jury can still come back and say not guilty. Because you will have, it's a part of the culture. And some very jurors, depending on the area where it is, may be aware of what has happened in their family. But I believe, and we decided to speak out. There needs to be some sort of national task force, which will be underpinned by empirical data coming from the courts and coming from Sissoko, the police, island-wide, so that you can see where you are having these high spikes in respect of sexual offenses. Let me tell you, gentlemen, there was a case that we prosecuted. I can talk about it without any name in a particular parish about 3 years ago. Mother was charged for aiding and abetting her boyfriend, who was not the child's father, in respect of sex with a child. No, rape and grievous sexual assault. Do you know that the child was 6 and lived with her aunt up the road? The mother gave the aunt the child from she was a baby. But occasionally the child would go and visit the mother. Do you know what the mother was doing? And happily they were convicted. She would put the child to lie down, use her fingers to open the child's vagina and prepare the child for her boyfriend. This is evidence. Prepare the
a 6-year-old child.
Yes.
God.
Her child that she bore. And her boyfriend would put his penis and have sex with the child. No. The child gave a statement. She reported the matter to her aunt, who was much more economically better off than her mother. And the boyfriend was arrested. And about a month after, and I'm saying this to you, as DPP, I got a request from the clerk of court for me to take the matter straight up to the circuit court on a voluntary bail. And when I looked on the statement, I saw where the child and the aunt gave a further statement saying that the child was having nightmares, she was wetting her bed, she was messing herself. What do you think had happened? She, although the accused was in custody, she was still going to go visit the mother. And the mother now it reminded her of what had been done to her. And she had to report it when the aunt probed. And gentlemen, on that basis, her mother was arrested for aiding and abetting. Well, the matter was tried, and both of them were convicted in the particular parish.
I hope they were
But
put away for a long time.
I was shocked. When I read this statement, I got up in my office and I looked up to heaven and I said, every time you think you have seen it all, you see something. You know, we have a case in another parish. I'm not going to call the name of the parish.
Before you tell us about that case, Madam DPP, please remember it because it's
Up on the
important. No, we're not up on the break. How long were the sentences that were handed
Well,
down?
I am not sure, but they got quite a bit. At least 15 years.
All
But
right.
there's another case in another parish now in February where the mother and the stepfather are charged for breaching Section 23 of the Sexual Offences Act, which is living off the prostitution, the earnings of prostitution. And the mother's daughter, who is the complainant, is 16. So, I'm not, after coming from Westmoreland, I've told my staff that we're really going to have to institute, just like what the police have, where we have, you know, somebody who comes in and allows us to vet because it's traumatizing.
Yes.
And we have to retain. But let us get to the solution, because I believe in solution. So when you return from the break, we discuss solution.
Yeah, boy.
I think this is a good time to
And,
take a
and
break.
that's just the tip of the iceberg in terms of some of the depravity we're seeing.
Hold it for us, Madam DPP. Time for the break.
Jamaica. This is a challenging time for all of us, but our flag says it all. The sun shineth, the land is green, and the people are strong and creative. The Sovereign Centers encourages everyone to help protect each other and our beloved country. Wear your mask, sanitize, and practice social distancing. Let's do it, Jamaica. Stay safe and stay well. A message from Sovereign Center, still the best place to shop.
The Watchman. Exploring issues shaping our society, government, and business. Provocative, unconventional, sometimes controversial. The Watchman stimulates your mind to unlock the answers to complex issues of the day. Dr. Henley Morgan is The Watchman.
The Watchman can be heard on Mondays and Wednesdays at 6:55 p.m. on Nationwide 90 FM. Produced by the Agency for Inner City Renewal, a breath of fresh air, bringing change to the inner city.
Thank you so very much for staying with us, listeners. We are discussing this whole business of sexual offenses. The prosecutors in the country are of the view that these cases are at pandemic levels in certain parishes in particular. The depravity of some of the circumstances being outlined by the country's Director of Public Prosecution, Queen's Counsel, I have seen and heard a lot of things while doing this job.
Sharon,
And-
remember, we read it in the files and we talk to the police.
Boy,
I'm just going to give you this little one before we go into the solution.
Yes, please.
I remember Crown Counsel came to me. I said, Miss Llewelyn, I have a problem. I spoke to the mother. She is the main eyewitness in terms of what happened to her child, but she's not being cooperative. I said, how old was the child? Oh, about 8 or 9 months.
Months?
8 or 9 months. What happened? Who is the accused? Her husband. I said, what happened? He said, Miss Llewelyn, The lady was mopping in the living room. She knows the husband was inside with the baby. And then she heard the baby scream out, 8 or 9 months, in the crib. When she went, just quietly, just slightly opened the door, what did she see? Her husband had his erect penis out on the child's genitalia, masturbating.
His own child.
His own child. And she gave a statement to the police. We had a file. We were ready to prosecute the case when the circuit commenced and when the Crown Counsel went down there and with the police now, seeking to get in touch with the mother. It turns out that she had packed up and left the parish, she and the baby. So what you will have sometimes is that the men, knowing what is happening, they come and they stand up there with a big smirk, knowing that the mother. Now just imagine that. Now we go now to the solution, because what we have been finding when we look at it close, then this is 6, 7 prosecutors, 8 prosecutors just chatting. Very often, I would say 80 to 90% of the mothers where you have these underage children being sexually assaulted, they're either not working or they're in very, very low paying jobs. So you have this subconscious ability, without even saying anything, of the accused to influence the course of events psychologically. Now, what we also find in terms of the young girls who have young boyfriends, or who may have a taximan or a bus conductor or somebody else who is maybe a friend of the family or lives in the same yard if it's a big yard. What we're also seeing is the effect of access to pornography. A lot of these young girls are highly sexualized. It's either because when you read the file, you see that where they grow up, you may have 7 children and all of them pack up in 1 room or 2 rooms. Or you may have 3 children and they're in the same 1 room of a big family yard with the mother and her most recent boyfriend also sharing the same room. But so what I believe are the solutions. First, a national. We were all talking a national task force, equivalent to the national task force on human trafficking. So you have all the stakeholders. So you don't have the stakeholders that I described operating in silos. And perhaps, I would like to say fighting for turf, because that sometimes tends to happen. You get so fixated, yes, you are helping the kids, but you want to look good in the public, so you are going along on a path. Whereas if you have a task force that meets, like the National Task Force on Human Trafficking, once a week, you will all be exposed, all the agencies at the same time, from the different ministries, to the same set of statistics that can inform policy. 2, we believe that there needs to be targeted intervention, whether in some of the schools where you happen to find, and I won't call the parish, where you have several incidents of sex under 16 between the kids on the school compound, or you may have areas in different parts of the communities where you have this low socioeconomic factor, which perhaps drives what I would call the apathy on the part of the mother after the initial reporting to either take the child away or to disengage from the system. So you need to triple the number of
Social workers.
If you do your research, you will find, invite a couple of the social workers on your program. They are greatly understaffed, because here again, perhaps the Ministry of Finance and their parent ministry have not kept pace with what is happening in the society. So the establishment that you may have had 30 years ago, 20 years ago, it's the same. So if you only had 20 spaces for social workers 20, 30 years ago, that is still the same establishment now.
Yes.
And you have a much higher need for this targeted program to really get into the heart of whatever the family is about and really get at the heart of being able to protect that child.
Yeah.
I think the homes, once a child, I had to deal with one such when I was in Westmoreland. Once a child sometimes is put in the home, it can work out well for them, but you can have situations where if the child has been rendered dysfunctional because of the whole of the abuse, by the time they get to the home at 14, 15, 16, they're on the runaway train where they run away. And because they're so highly sexualized, they invariably end up with some adult who they think can perhaps replace the father that they never knew and take care of them. And then, gentlemen, we segue into how it is that some of them are maimed or killed. Because their bodies are objectified, they don't have any self-confidence in themselves. The guys that they end up with know this and perhaps treat them like dirt. And eventually, violence is done to them as a means of control. And then the cycle just continues because another thing we have found, sometimes it's intergenerational. You will have a grandmother who is 45 because she had her first child at 15, 16. Then she has a daughter who lives in the same yard, who also has a daughter who is a teenager because she had her first child.
As a teenager?
At 15, right. And then you have now the teenager, who the mother, the grandmother will complain because the police tell us. Or sometimes you talk to the mother, the grandmother, and say, where's the child? Because we're ready to do the case now. The child has run away, and she's with some man, you know, and she's only 15.
So DPP.
We really need to have a joined-up approach.
Yes.
And to really, I would
You
like
said-
to say,
you
force
said-
the political directorate on both sides to elevate this particular area to how they regard murder, because what you're basically doing is murdering the child's spirit. So the child, some may look at the child when they reach 15, 16, 17 and say, oh, that person's promiscuous. But you are not aware that from the time she was 5, 6, 7,
She was
she has been
sexualized.
molested. So she has become dysfunctional.
And there was no intervention at all.
If there is no intervention, that seals the child's fate. We have in situations where there's intervention. Sometimes the prosecutors themselves call the victim support unit, we call the children's advocate, or we call what used to be the CDA, the CPSSA. But I think what you need is a national task force which can inform policy.
DPP.
Perhaps the chairman could be Ms. Grange or her PS.
Yes.
But we need to have a joined-up approach to deal with it.
DPP, you said something that is just sticking with me. That you find in a number of these cases, the mothers
Yes.
who are in many instances eyewitnesses and critical to winning a conviction, just absenting themselves. Am I
Well, they
correct?
not only upset themselves, they take the child away.
Okay.
They move the child, stop going to the school, they move away.
So let me ask, Madam DPP, you can't win a conviction in that case. So the case dies, right?
All right, enter a nully, or we
Yeah.
offer no evidence. Because
Right.
if the matter has been before the court, a trial, 4 or 5 times,
Right.
they have to put up or shut up.
Right. But let me ask, in terms of a solution and a response of the state, yeah? Can't we supply the relevant state agencies with the particulars of not only that mother, but that perpetrator, yeah? And I'm thinking aloud here now, and they be monitored and be
No,
tracked?
you can't do that because,
Tell me.
remember,
So them get to a scot-free.
the accused is entitled to all the rights under the Charter of Rights and the Constitution, including his right to privacy, including his right to freedom of expression and liberty to be able to go up and down. So if it is that the prosecution is not able to prove a case against the accused because you don't have a credible witness, then you have no case, and the system, according to our jurisprudence, must let him go. Which is why I'm saying...
Yes, you let him go.
You have to let him go, but
Yes.
you cannot
But as part of
follow,
the...
you cannot follow him.
But
up.
a part of the intelligence and the capacity building of the state, yeah? That person must be somehow noted, recorded,
No,
yeah?
you can't
In a bank,
do that.
in a database.
You can't do that. You'd be breaching his constitutional right.
Oh, Lord.
It is only when the person has been convicted that the whole issue of the sex registry under the particular regulations or the provisions of the Act would come in.
Yeah.
But if there is no conviction, you cannot do anything that would breach his constitutional or charter right. So this is why, and let me tell you something. When I hear, and I'm not knocking the PSOJ or even some of you journalists, because what I realize is that you're all trapped in an ivory tower. You're not on the ground.
We're not in the trenches like you.
No, you're not in the trenches, having to speak and try to cope. Let me tell you something. It has reached a stage in a gentleman that you would think is our relative, is the complainant, in terms of some of the efforts that we have to make. Right? And what you have to do in terms of using moral suasion. What you have to do. So the thing is that you don't have sufficient police. Police officers don't live in the bedroom or in the houses or any of these people. And there is, in some communities, as I said to another media house, it used to be that it takes a village to raise a child. Now, in certain communities, the village is accommodating the breach of the child's rights and the abuse of the child, because it has become a part of the subculture. And then what is disturbing when you see the high sexualizing of some of these young people, both boys and girls, is that the girls consider the objectification of their bodies as just a natural thing. It's a natural thing. And in their head, it is, and I'm going to be delicate, it becomes the means to get $100 or $200 because the man said, come here, come have sex with me. Don't tell anybody. And they give them a little smalls and they move on. It is heartbreaking.
It is.
Madam DPP, I must tell you that I'm having difficulty processing a lot of what you're saying to me now, because of how we started out this segment.
Well, I am just bringing reality.
And it is appreciated. It is appreciated.
All to I wouldn't say to force, to get the political directorate on both sides to see this in the way that human trafficking was seen. And the reason why human trafficking...
The pressure from external.
Well, and I can tell you, out of all the Caribbean countries, Jamaica has the most conviction in terms of human trafficking. And we have a pretty well-oiled machinery now in terms of all areas of the state apparatus.
I think it's called Not for Tip. That's the
Yes,
National
but
Task Force.
Jamaica does
So
very
we
well
need
now.
a task force to look at the...
And not only that, Tyrone, just that to look at, to make sure that the data is there and exposed to all the stakeholders at the same time in a joined up way, so that perhaps the chairman, which would be Miss Grange or her PS, would be able to say, listen, St. Thomas, St. Mary, Portland, we need to coordinate with whatever state agencies there, or put more there, get more social workers in this particular community. From what the courts are saying, from what the SOCA is saying, we have a cluster here that needs targeted intervention. And also, gentlemen, they need to have sustained public education. The same way that we attack, in a great way, HIV. Remember all the programs that we had, public education, also with human trafficking, we need to have sustained public education. Let me tell you something. You know, is that another thing that is striking? Poor parenting, lack of supervision, in the same way that you have a situation where in some big yards, the mother will just step out, go down to the shop and leave a 8-year-old to look after a 6-year-old and a 3-year-old. And then you see the place burned down. And everybody says, oh, feel sorry for her. Well, let me tell you, I've had to do rulings on those matters. And I don't hesitate. Tell the police to lock her up. Lock her up. A lot of people are having children. And they believe it's like puss kitten. You ever see a puss kitten carrying the kitten in her jaws? Mm-hmm. Yes. People, I remember I spoke to a witness once. Very nice man. I can see him now. Not going to tell you what parish, but I thanked him for his courage in coming forward to give evidence in a murder case. And I was talking to him with another witness, and we're talking about children. So I told him, boy, in my old age, I only have one. And he said, I said, how many you have, sir? 15. I said, 15? So how you manage? Mm-hmm. He said, Mom, I make sure that in 9 baby mother, you was over the 54, you know, in 9 baby mother, all of them work. And he looked so pleased with himself. I didn't have the heart to disillusion him. I just said, oh, I see. So you need a reorientation on this concept.
I want to take it back to something, though, Madam DPP, if you'll allow me.
And what it means to have the care of a child.
I want to take you back to something, if you'll allow me. That disturbing case, rather disturbing case you mentioned. Well,
All of them
you're right. Disturbing. You're right. But the one with the father and the 8-month-old, yes.
Okay.
Right. The mother, of course, filed the complaint.
Yes.
Yes, and then...
And he was arrested and charged.
And then when it was time to face the court now, the mother and the baby went missing, you say?
Yes.
Now, there's nothing you can do to the accused man because you don't have any witness. And you say...
You have any witness, so you have to offer no evidence.
No evidence, right. What about having the police track down this mother, since she was witness to what is obviously a crime that was committed against a child? If the police is able to track that down, where could we go lawfully from there?
Tyrone, even if the police were able to track down that mother, sometimes we put the person in the witness box, even though we suspect that they are not going to engage with the process, and hope for the best. But sometimes, if you do that, the person will just indicate that I'm not giving any evidence against the man, or I have forgiven him and I've moved on with my life. That's just one of the stories you get. I've forgiven him and I've moved on with my life. But you know behind the scenes that the family, remember you have families on both sides, may have begged for him, as well as maybe he works, he may have given her a generous cash settlement so that she and the baby can go and settle somewhere else. Because what he wants is his freedom and not to be put in peril of being incarcerated. Mm-hmm. So he can always move on to a second or third or fourth relationship with another woman and live his life. So that is it. But it is what it is. And what really disturbs me is the fact that you have a whole host of girls, young women to be, who have been rendered possibly dysfunctional and prevented from achieving their full potential. They have been derailed because that targeted intervention, which may assist in keeping them on a path which gives the greatest of respect to education as the prime means of mobility. they are distracted from that, and then it becomes a man. Just recently, a gentleman pleaded guilty. I don't know if you remember reading about it. His baby mother was 17 when she was killed. She had a baby at age 16 for him. His family took the child, but from what the police and her family said to me, because I felt led, I had to speak to the mother. I was so disturbed by the whole thing, because this young girl at 17, she kept on having this cat and dog relationship with this man and this woman, for quarreling and quarreling. But she would leave her mother's house to still go over to his house. And according to the man, when he pleaded guilty, we accepted the plea to manslaughter. We didn't have any eyewitness. We didn't have anything else that contradicted him. But he gave a caution statement, and he said this girl of 17, said to him in his room, in his family yard, she came over there, I had got somebody to kill you. But the person died 3 days ago, whereupon he started to strangle her in anger. Now in law, that would be legal provocation. If we had tried the case, the judge would have had to leave manslaughter on that basis. And he strangled her, and I don't know if she fainted, but he got frightened, wrapped her up in a sheet, and then got somebody to help him, and miraculously, there was a hole at the back of his yard in the duck pen. And this 17-year-old girl, the mother of his child, he put the body down in the hole until it was discovered some 2 or 3 days later.
Yeah, I recall that one. But DPP, that 8-month child,
Yes.
with the husband and wife, yeah, can't forget it. What is the responsibility of the state in protecting that child? Because that's a child at risk.
Yes, but you see, the child has a mother. It is the child can only be put in need of care and protection if both the mother and the father breach provisions of the Child Care and Protection Act, and by their actions they put the child in danger.
But wouldn't she be in
her
breach,
own
right?
admission, yeah, she complained, didn't you?
Right.
Yes, she gave a statement.
By her own admission, that child should be removed from her. If you can't get the perpetrator, that evil whatever, you can't leave the child in their
you
custody.
would not be able to do that, because it's because she was acting in the child's best interest, why she would be held to have gone to the police, made a report. So once you have, that is the whole area of family law, once you have the child being protected and cared for by one parent, then the state cannot move in. The state could only move in if neither, or for example, the couple, the mother who is charged for living off the earnings of prostitution, which is on its way to human trafficking, by the way, and her boyfriend, or suppose it had been the father of the complainant, mother and father, then the 2 of them are before the court, and they had put the child in danger, then the state would have been able to act. But once you have one parent who is able to function and show that they can care for the child, then the state cannot move in and take that child. So, gentlemen, this is just the tip of the iceberg in terms of what the police and the prosecutors have to deal with. And I'm telling you, too, you have other situations. Another prosecutor was telling me about a case where this is a mother, and either her boyfriend or it might be the child's father. This is a male child who was about 4, 5, 6, between 4 and 6. And how it came to light to the police was that the child had literally been expelled from the little school that he was at. You know why? The teachers saw the child's behavior, where he was mimicking being a predator. So he was running up to other boy children in the school and handling the genitalia of the other boy children. So when they checked it out, and looked at the history of the family history and questioned the mother, it turns out that from the child was a baby, the mother had the child sleeping with her partner even when she wasn't there, from he was a baby. It was not the child's father. So the child clearly was being molested by her partner over several years to the point that he learned certain behavior and he had to be expelled because he was going to be a danger to the other children. So it can work anyway. But, you know, it is quite clear that personal responsibility and knowing what a parent is supposed to do in caring for a child escapes a lot of people who just want to get a child. To get a child, sometimes as a means, yes, of connection between you and a partner, but also, I'm trying to say it delicately, it functions as a means for some people of getting some sort of monetary gain.
Yeah.
That is a whole nother side. But I am interested in getting solutions and perhaps for the authorities to take a look at the statistics, look at the historical statistics, look at the court statistics, look at the parishes, liaise with the different agencies and really seriously consider having a joined up approach, perhaps under the leadership or chairmanship of Minister Grange or her permanent secretary, as we have with human trafficking, which is under the task force, under the chairmanship of the permanent secretary in the Ministry of National Security, and have that meeting every month with all the stakeholders so that you can have a joined up approach and be able to have targeted intervention in certain communities.
And our research and special investigations unit, Madam DPP, you have added another one to the list of things that beg for further probe and reporting. This is one of them.
Well, definitely.
This is one of them because
it's very sad. And then you
I'm
can
sitting here just
with COVID, where a lot of children have been cooped up at home.
Yes.
But I said, lack of supervision. This thing where you live in a big yard and you just have your 3-4-year-old and you just leave them with anybody. You know, Cliff, you're a parent. Tyrone, you're a parent. I'm a parent. And we know that that is a no-no. You have to be very careful in respect of your child. Because that mistake you make to leave them with the wrong person can scar them
for life. Thank you, DPP.
Thank you, Madam DPP.
You're so very welcome.
Tyrone, you have more work to do.
A whole heap work. We as a country.
Yes.
We have a lot of work to do.
We have to help. Yeah.
Indeed. Our
but
children.
DPP, I tell you, it bothers me. I just can't see why would the Jamaican state just leave that child. Because that child is going to suffer again.
Yes, but Cliff, remember that you have a whole host of laws and you have the Constitution, you have the Charter of Rights. But what has happened is that successive administration, yes, they have been funding their state agencies, but they are not necessarily the policy makers, right? I sometimes think that there must be something, in the atmosphere in Gordon House that, we poor mortals will never know. But unfortunately, a lot of them are not in the trenches as practitioners. And also, perhaps if they become the man, and I'm saying this about the political directorate, irrespective of who it is, if they become the man in the mirror in their constituents to challenge the people in terms of what is the appropriate behavior. It's not a question of just a little sex. They may lose popularity. So perhaps what we can do is invite them at the policy level to really elevate it in terms of the resources and the focus and the political will to what you have in terms of human trafficking or murder.
It's impatient of debate, though. We there must be something needs to be amended somewhere, Cliff, to not allow for a circumstance of this nature to go unchecked. It is a difficult one to accept.
Nothing needs to be amended, because when you're dealing with children, the first port of call is going to be either the parent, who can establish that they can look after the child, or maybe.
But in this case, that is not so.
Parent.
But in this case, it's not so.
Because the mother with the baby.
Yeah, when time comes for her to stand up and be counted, she
will be counted because she probably has maybe she has migrated with the baby, and she will live her life over there. And when the child says, "Mommy, whatever happened to Daddy?" and she will just say, "Oh, your father got married."
We don't know that.
Like that. Yes.
We don't know that.
If the child, maybe some women take the view, like what you said, that lady now was able to afford it, she worked. If it was that she gave the evidence, I remember, as a wife, she is competent, but she is not compellable. But again, that is a matter of law. So she and only she. So in other words, we can't get a warrant to force her to come, because she's a wife. When I say wife, not common law wife. We're talking about wife as recognized in the old time sense, right? In terms of having had a life and that sort of thing. Under the law, a wife is competent to give evidence against her husband, but she's not compellable. In a common law situation, the common law wife would be compellable. So you could cause a warrant once you have established that they're aware of the trial date, and force the person to come to court after the warrant is executed and put her in the witness box. But you couldn't do that with her.
All right, DPP. Thank you much. Thank you much.
You're so welcome.
Yeah. This is Nationwide at 5.
The Watchman. Exploring issues shaping our society, government, and business. Provocative, unconventional. Dr. Henley Morgan is The Watchman.
Good evening. Honor is declining in the Jamaican society. There is a noticeable and precipitous decline in honor in the Jamaican society. From King's House to Jamaica House, from Gordon House to the business house, from the schoolhouse to the church house, and yes, the family house too, people feel they can talk anything about anybody at any time, anywhere they choose, without having to answer to anyone. The explosion in the use of social media has served to make the problem worse. An example of this is demonstrated in a